I was at my kitchen table, going through the final touches for Thanksgiving dinner, when the side door opened. It was my grandson, Tyler, his face pale. "Grandma, leave here now," he said, his eyes wide with fear as he practically dragged me toward the exit. I was confused. The evening was supposed to be lovely. The smell of turkey roasting, the sound of my favorite holiday music playing softly. Why was Tyler so desperate to get me out of there? Then he whispered the words that made my world freeze. "They sold the house. They're not taking you with them." The warmth of the kitchen, a space that had been the heart of our family for 50 years, suddenly felt cold and alien. Just moments before, I had been adjusting the delicate lattice on my prize-winning apple pie, the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg, a familiar hug in the air. The old grandfather clock in the hall chimed 3, its deep, resonant tones usually a comfort. Today, they sounded like a countdown. My son Mark and his wife Susan were due any minute. I'd spent 2 days preparing their favorite dishes. The green bean casserole Susan loved, the sweet potato mash Mark had adored since he was a boy. This home, the one my late husband David and I had built with our own hands, was polished and gleaming, ready to be filled with the laughter and love of the holiday. But Tyler's words hung in the air, thick and suffocating, eclipsing the festive aroma. My grandson, only 14, stood before me, his usual teenage swagger gone, replaced by a raw, genuine panic that twisted my stomach into a knot. I looked from his terrified face to the festive table, set for 4, and felt a profound disconnect, as if I were a ghost in my own life. A life, it seemed, that had just been sold out from under me. I pulled Tyler closer, my hand trembling as I brushed the hair from his forehead. "What are you talking about, sweetie? This is our home." His eyes, so much like his grandfather's, welled with tears. He shook his head, a single devastating motion. "Not anymore, Grandma. I heard them. They signed the papers last week. They were going to tell you after dinner and drop you at the Silver Creek retirement home." He choked on the name. Silver Creek. It was the place you went when you had no one and nothing left. The betrayal was so immense, so audacious, I couldn't immediately process it. Mark, my only child. Susan, the daughter I'd always wanted. They had smiled at me over dinner just last Sunday, complimenting my roast chicken, all while knowing they were about to discard me like a piece of old furniture. The carefully constructed world I inhabited, built on a foundation of love and trust, crumbled into dust. My breath caught in my throat. I sank onto a kitchen chair, my legs suddenly unable to support the weight of this new reality. Tyler quickly pulled his phone from his pocket, his fingers flying across the screen. He held it up to me. There it was, a real estate listing for my address, my home, the garden I tended every morning, the porch swing David had hung. The window over the sink ride watched generations of neighborhood kids play, marked with a bold red banner. Sold? They were talking on the phone with the realtor last night, Tyler said, his voice barely a whisper. They said that closing was tomorrow. They're moving to Arizona. They said you'd be better off with people your own age. Better off? As if my life, my connections, my very identity were things they could assess and reassign at will. The casual cruelty of it was breathtaking. I started connecting the dots, each one a tiny stab of pain. Mark's vague answers about his job, Susan's sudden interest in my finances, asking about my pension under the guise of making sure I was comfortable.
The boxes in the garage, they'd hastily covered with the tarp, claiming they were just storing old things. They weren't just storing things, they were packing up their lives and methodically packing me out of it. The shock began to recede, replaced by a cold, unfamiliar sensation. It was rage, a deep glacial anger that solidified the trembling in my hands. David had always said I was too soft, too willing to see the good in people. He'd made me promise I would always protect what we had built. Not just the house, but the legacy, the security. I had failed that promise by trusting so blindly. For a moment, I saw their plan unfold with perfect clarity. A nice, pleasant Thanksgiving dinner. A final performance of a happy family, followed by a gentle, patronizing speech about my best interests. Then they would drive away, leaving me on the sterile doorstep of a facility, my life reduced to a single room and scheduled activities. They weren't just abandoning me. They were erasing me. In that instant, something shifted within me. The hurt was still there, a raw, open wound, but beside it, a new feeling took root. Determination. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, my generosity for senility. They had forgotten who I was. And they had definitely forgotten about the family trust.
I stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. The sound was decisive, final. I looked at my grandson, the one person in this collapsing world who had shown me loyalty. "Tyler," I said, my voice steady now, infused with a purpose I hadn't felt in years. "They are not going to win." He looked at me, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I walked into my husband's old study, a room Mark and Susan rarely entered. It smelled of old books and David's pipe tobacco. On the wall hung a landscape painting David had bought on our honeymoon. I took it down. Behind it was a small wall safe. Tyler watched, his mouth agape. "I didn't know that was there," he breathed. "Your parents didn't either," I replied, my fingers working the combination, a sequence I hadn't used in a decade but had never forgotten. Inside was a leather-bound folder. The title was embossed in gold, The Vance Family Trust. I laid the documents on David's old oak desk. There it was, exactly as I remembered. A comprehensive trust designed to protect the family's foundational assets, the house, the investment portfolio David had painstakingly built, and tucked within it a document I had signed 30 years ago, a durable power of attorney. It granted me, Eleanor Vance, sole and absolute control over all trust assets in the event of its primary beneficiary, Mark, acted in a manner that was financially reckless or threatened the core principles of the trust. Selling the family home to abandon his mother, I was fairly certain that qualified. I knew what I had to do. This wasn't revenge. It was a course correction. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for Arthur Harris, our family lawyer for 40 years. "Arthur," I said when he answered, "it's Eleanor Vance. I need you to enact my power of attorney over the trust immediately." There was a brief silence on the other end, then a low whistle. "Eleanor, it's good to hear your voice. I take it Mark is finally getting that sports car he's always wanted." "Something like that," I said grimly. "Send the freeze notification to all associated accounts, including the escrow account for the sale of my house." "Consider it done," Arthur said. "They won't be able to buy a cup of coffee by the time you hang up." I looked at Tyler. "Pack a bag. Just the essentials. We're leaving, but we aren't running away. We're simply rearranging the furniture." Mark and Susan pulled into the driveway at precisely 4 o'clock, their car full of smiles and feigned holiday cheer. They walked into a house that was eerily silent. The turkey sat on the counter, golden brown but tragically uncarved. The pies were cooling on the rack. The table was perfectly set, but the house was empty. "Mom," Mark called out, his voice echoing slightly in the stillness. "We're here." Susan went to the back door. "Maybe she's in the garden." But the garden was empty too. A slight unease began to creep in. Mark tried calling my cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. "That's odd," he said, frowning. "Her phone is never off." Susan, ever the pragmatist, shrugged. "Maybe her battery died. I'm starving. Let's just start carving the turkey." An hour passed, then 2. The sun began to set, painting the empty dining room in hues of orange and purple. Their manufactured cheer had dissolved into irritation and then into real concern. "This isn't right," Mark said, pacing the living room. "Where could she be?" His phone buzzed. It was a fraud alert from his bank. His credit card had been declined when he tried to prepay for a rental car for their Arizona trip. Confused, Susan opened her banking app. She stared at the screen, her face draining of all color. "Mark," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Look at this." She held the phone out to him. The checking account, which should have contained the 6-figure deposit from the house sale, read, "Available balance, 000." At the same moment, an email notification popped up on Mark's phone. The subject line was chillingly simple: "Official notice regarding the Vance family trust." He opened it. Attached was a legally executed document, and at the bottom, a signature he hadn't seen in years, written in my elegant, firm script: "Eleanor Vance, power of attorney." The world tilted. They looked at each other, the full, catastrophic weight of their miscalculation crashing down upon them. They were trapped. They were in a house they no longer owned, with no access to any money, and the matriarch they had dismissed as a feeble old woman had just, from a distance, checkmated their entire lives. Through the window, the "sold" sign on the front lawn seemed to mock them, a monument to their own greed and stupidity. From the window of a clean, quiet hotel room across town, I watched the last rays of Thanksgiving's sun disappear. Tyler was on the bed, absorbed in a movie on his tablet, finally looking relaxed. The room was anonymous, but I felt more at home than I had in my own house all week. The panic and pain had subsided, leaving behind a profound, settled peace. I had spent so many years seeing myself only as a mother and a grandmother, my identity so intertwined with my family's needs that I had forgotten the capable, intelligent woman I was before all that, the woman David had married, a woman who understood contracts and consequences. This betrayal, as devastating as it was, had been a violent, necessary awakening. It had forced me to reclaim my own agency. My new purpose felt both simple and monumental: to build a new life for myself and to provide a stable, loving environment for the grandson who had saved me. The family trust wouldn't be a weapon, but a tool to fund Tyler's education, to secure a new, smaller home for us, and to teach him the values his parents had so spectacularly failed to grasp: loyalty, integrity, and respect. My phone, which I had turned back on, buzzed with a string of frantic, angry texts from Mark. I ignored them. Instead, I opened a new message. My thumbs moved slowly, but deliberately, across the screen. "Mark, when you and Susan are ready to have an honest conversation about your plans, let me know. I've booked you a prepaid room at the Holiday Inn on the interstate. Happy Thanksgiving." I hit send. There was no anger left, only a quiet clarity. I had lost a son, perhaps, but I had found myself again. And for the first time in a very long time, I was looking forward to tomorrow.